The thunderous crack of a gunshot echoed through the vast expanse of the Utah desert as Lillian Vaughn's horse reared in panic, nearly throwing her from the saddle. It wasn't outlaws or Indians that had startled the animal, but the sudden appearance of a rattlesnake, coiled and ready to strike on the dusty trail ahead. The year was 1878, and Lillian had foolishly ventured too far from Kelton on what was supposed to be a simple afternoon ride. "Easy, Pepper," Lillian called out, struggling to maintain her seat as the mare pranced nervously, hooves kicking up clouds of dust. At 22, Lillian possessed a spirited independence that often led her into situations her father, the town's only banker, would certainly disapprove of. Her chestnut hair, usually pinned neatly beneath her hat, had come loose in wild tendrils around her face. The gunshot had come from beyond the ridge to her right, and as Lillian fought to control her horse, a man on horseback appeared, rifle in hand. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his face shadowed beneath a well-worn Stetson. Lillian recognized him immediately as Wade Calloway, one of the ranchers whose property bordered her father's land outside Kelton. "Miss Vaughn," he called out, lowering his rifle as he approached. "That was a warning shot. There's a nest of rattlers in these parts. You shouldn't be out here alone." Lillian lifted her chin defiantly, though her heart still raced from the fright. "I'm perfectly capable of handling myself, Mr. Calloway. And I'll thank you not to frighten my horse half to death with your gunfire." Wade's expression remained stoic, though a flicker of amusement passed through his blue eyes. At 30, he'd built a modest but growing cattle operation after coming west from Missouri 5 years earlier. His reputation in Kelton was that of a fair but reserved man who kept to himself, avoiding the saloons and social gatherings that dominated the town's limited social scene. "My apologies to your horse," he said, the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "But rattlesnakes don't much care about a woman's capability. They'll strike all the same." Before Lillian could form a retort, Pepper suddenly screamed a sound Lillian had never heard from her faithful mare. The horse reared violently, and this time Lillian couldn't maintain her grip. She tumbled backward, hitting the ground with a painful thud that knocked the wind from her lungs. "Lillian!" Wade shouted, dismounting in one fluid motion. But Lillian's attention was fixed on the snake, a massive diamondback that had emerged from beneath a nearby rock. It slithered toward her with terrifying speed, its rattle a death knell in the desert silence. She scrambled backward, but her riding skirt tangled around her legs. Wade raised his rifle, but hesitated. The snake was too close to Lillian now for a safe shot. Throwing the weapon aside, he lunged forward, but it was too late. The rattlesnake struck with lightning precision, its fangs sinking into Lillian's calf through her riding skirt. She screamed in shock and pain as the snake retreated, coiling again for a second strike. Wade's knife flashed in the sunlight, severing the rattler's head with one powerful stroke. Without hesitation, he knelt beside Lillian, whose face had already gone pale with fear. "Hold still," he commanded, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. He pulled out his knife again and quickly cut away the fabric of her skirt around the wound. 2 distinct puncture marks were already seeping blood, the skin around them reddening rapidly. "Oh God," Lillian whispered, her voice trembling. "We're at least 3 hours from Kelton." Wade's face was grim as he assessed the situation. "And the doctor might not even be in town. I need to get the venom out now." Without asking permission, he lowered his mouth to her calf, his strong hands holding her leg firmly in place. Lillian gasped at the intimate contact, but the searing pain of the bite overrode any sense of impropriety. Wade sucked at the wound, spitting the blood and venom onto the ground beside them. Again and again he returned to the task, ignoring Lillian's whimpers of pain and the taste of copper that filled his mouth. After what seemed an eternity, he sat back on his heels, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "I've done what I can here, but you need a doctor. The venom's already in your system." Lillian felt a wave of dizziness wash over her, and her vision blurred at the edges. "I feel strange," she mumbled, fighting to stay conscious. Wade moved quickly, tearing a strip from his own shirt to bind the wound tightly. "That'll slow the venom from spreading further." His hands were surprisingly gentle for a man who wrestled cattle and mended fences all day. "My father," Lillian began, but another wave of dizziness swept over her. "I'll get you to him," Wade promised, gathering her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, fragile almost, despite her usual display of stubborn independence. "Can you stay awake for me, Lillian? Talk to me." He settled her carefully onto his horse, then mounted behind her, one strong arm holding her securely against his chest. Her head lolled against his shoulder as he urged the horse forward, leaving Pepper to follow. "Tell me about Boston," he said, knowing she'd spent time there with relatives before returning to Kelton the previous year. "What was it like?" Lillian struggled to focus. "Cold, proper. The ladies wear gloves everywhere, even in summer." Her words slurred slightly, and Wade felt fear grip his heart. "Keep talking," he urged, increasing their pace. "Did you attend many fancy balls there?" "3," she murmured. "I danced with a congressman's son. He stepped on my toes." Wade smiled despite his worry. "I can't imagine anyone would forget dancing with you, Miss Vaughn." "You've never asked me to dance," she observed, her head growing heavier against his shoulder. "I don't dance," he replied simply, feeling her body temperature rising against him. "Fever a bad sign?" "Lillian, stay with me now." But her eyes had closed, her breathing shallow. Wade's heart pounded with fear as he realized Kelton was still hours away, and Lillian's condition was deteriorating rapidly. Making a quick decision, he changed direction. His own ranch was closer, perhaps an hour's hard ride, and he kept medicines there for snake bites in his cattle. It wouldn't be as effective as a doctor's treatment, but it might buy her time. "Hold on," he whispered, pressing his heels into his horse's flanks, urging him to greater speed. The sun beat down mercilessly as Wade pushed his horse harder than he ever had before. Lillian's breathing grew more labored, and her skin burned with fever against his arm. Occasionally she would stir, mumbling incoherently, but mostly she remained unconscious, her body growing limper in his arms. Wade had never considered himself a praying man, but he found himself bargaining with God as the miles passed beneath them. The woman in his arms, this headstrong banker's daughter who challenged him at every town meeting and rode alone despite the dangers, couldn't die. Not like this. Not when he'd only just begun to acknowledge the way his eyes sought her out whenever he visited Kelton. Finally, his modest ranch house came into view, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the yard. His ranch hand, Miguel, saw them approaching and ran to meet them, his face etched with concern. "Snake," Wade explained tersely as Miguel helped lift Lillian's unconscious form from the horse. "Get the medicine box and boil water." Wade carried Lillian into his home, placing her gently on his own bed. Her face was flushed with fever, her breathing shallow. "Miss Lillian?" Miguel asked, recognizing the banker's daughter as he hurried in with the requested supplies. "Rattlesnake bite about 2 hours ago," Wade explained, removing the makeshift bandage to examine the wound. The area around the punctures had swollen alarmingly, angry red streaks beginning to spread upward from her calf. Miguel crossed himself. "I will ride for the doctor in Kelton." "And her father," Wade added, dampening a cloth to place on Lillian's forehead. "Tell him she's here and I've done what I can." After Miguel departed, Wade carefully administered the herbal tincture he kept for snake bites, dabbing it on the wound and forcing a few drops between Lillian's parched lips. It was a remedy he'd learned from an old trapper years ago, not a cure, but something that might slow the venom's progress. Night fell, and still Lillian burned with fever. Wade sat beside her, constantly replacing the cool cloths on her forehead, speaking to her softly, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. He told her about his ranch, about the cattle he was raising, about the spring that ran through his property that he thought she might like to see someday. "You'll be just fine," he promised, though fear gripped him each time her breathing seemed to falter. "You're too stubborn to let a snake get the better of you." In the darkest hours before dawn, Lillian's fever broke suddenly. Wade, who had dozed off in the chair beside the bed, woke to the sound of her voice. "Water," she whispered, her throat painfully dry. Wade nearly knocked over the chair in his haste to reach for the cup beside the bed. Gently lifting her head, he helped her drink. "Mr. Calloway," she murmured, recognition dawning in her eyes. "Where am I?" "My ranch," he explained, relief flooding through him at the clarity in her gaze. "You were too far from town. How do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of buffalo," she admitted weakly. "But I'm alive, thanks to you." Wade shook his head. "You're not out of danger yet. The doctor should be here soon." Lillian's hand found his, her fingers surprisingly strong as they curled around his calloused palm. "You saved my life." Her touch sent an unexpected jolt through him, and Wade suddenly became acutely aware of the impropriety of their situation, an unmarried woman in his home, in his bed, with no chaperone. Her father would have every right to call him out when he arrived. "I did what anyone would do," he said, gently extricating his hand from hers. A small smile played at her lips. "Not anyone would suck venom from a snake bite." Wade felt heat rise to his face. "I apologize for the necessity of it. Don't apologize for saving my life, Mr. Calloway." Her eyes, though tired, held a spark of her usual determination. "Though I fear my reputation may not survive even if I do." The reality of her words hit him hard. Kelton was a small town, and gossip traveled faster than wildfire. An unmarried woman spending the night at a bachelor's ranch, regardless of the circumstances, would set tongues wagging for months. "Your father will understand it was an emergency," Wade said, though he wasn't entirely convinced. Thomas Vaughn was protective of his only daughter and had made no secret of his hopes that she would marry the son of a banking associate from Salt Lake City. "My father." Lillian's eyes widened with sudden realization. "He must be worried sick. I sent Miguel to fetch him and the doctor." They should arrive. The sound of approaching horses interrupted him. Wade moved to the window, relief washing over him as he recognized Thomas Vaughn's buggy and the doctor's wagon pulling into the yard. "They're here," he told Lillian, watching as she tried unsuccessfully to sit up. "Don't strain yourself. I'll explain everything." Minutes later, the small house was filled with activity as Dr. Harrison examined Lillian's wound and Thomas Vaughn paced anxiously nearby. "You were fortunate, Miss Vaughn," the doctor concluded, repacking his medical bag. "Mr. Calloway's quick action likely saved your life, though you're not out of danger yet. The swelling concerns me, and there's risk of infection." Thomas Vaughn turned to Wade, his expression a complex mixture of gratitude and suspicion. "It seems I owe you my daughter's life, Calloway." "She needs proper care," Wade said, avoiding the older man's searching gaze. "My ranch hand has prepared your buggy with blankets to make her comfortable for the journey back to town." "I insist you accept some compensation for your assistance," Vaughn began, reaching for his wallet. "That won't be necessary," Wade cut him off firmly. "Anyone would have done the same. Lillian, who had remained silent during this exchange, suddenly spoke up. "Father, Mr. Calloway deserves our gratitude, not our money, and I won't be returning to town today." Both men turned to her in surprise. "The doctor just said you're still at risk," her father protested. "Precisely," Lillian replied, her voice weak but determined. "Dr. Harrison, would moving me now be advisable?" The doctor hesitated, glancing between father and daughter. "Ideally, no. The less movement of that leg, the better for the next day or two." "But surely, Mr. Calloway—" "I'll stay with her," Thomas Vaughn declared firmly. "We can't impose further on Mr. Calloway's hospitality." Wade found himself caught in an impossible situation. Having Thomas Vaughn stay at his modest ranch was almost as uncomfortable a prospect as continuing to care for Lillian alone. Yet he couldn't deny the doctor's medical advice. "I have a spare room," he offered reluctantly. "You're welcome to stay, Mr. Vaughn, until your daughter can be safely moved." And so it was decided. The doctor left detailed instructions for Lillian's care, promising to return the following day. Miguel was dispatched to town with a note for the Vaughn's housekeeper, requesting clothes and personal items for both Lillian and her father. That evening, an uneasy quiet settled over the ranch house. Thomas Vaughn had taken up residence in Wade's sparse guest room, while Wade himself prepared to spend the night on a bedroll in the main room. He had just finished arranging his makeshift bed when Thomas Vaughn emerged, looking uncomfortable in his city clothes. "Mr. Calloway," he began formally, "I believe I owe you an explanation." Wade straightened, wary of the older man's tone. "No explanation necessary, sir. Your daughter was injured on my land." "Not about that." Vaughn glanced toward the closed door of the bedroom where Lillian was resting. "About my reaction to your assistance. You see, I'm well aware of the attention you've shown my daughter at various town functions." Wade felt a flush of embarrassment creep up his neck. He had always been careful to maintain a respectful distance from Lillian in public, but apparently his interest hadn't gone unnoticed. "Sir, I assure you," Vaughn held up a hand. "I'm not accusing you of impropriety. Quite the contrary. You've always been a gentleman, which is why I found it concerning when I learned Lillian had spent the night here unchaperoned." "It was a medical emergency," Wade said stiffly. "Nothing more, of course." Vaughn studied him intently. "My daughter speaks highly of you, you know. She admires your commitment to this land, your independence." He paused. "Qualities I had hoped she might find in a husband with better prospects." The blunt assessment stung, but Wade couldn't deny the truth of it. His ranch was modest compared to the wealth Thomas Vaughn had accumulated. He was still establishing himself, with dreams larger than his current circumstances. "I understand your concerns," Wade said carefully, "and I want to assure you that I have only the highest respect for your daughter. What happened yesterday doesn't change that." Thomas Vaughn nodded slowly. "I believe you, Mr. Calloway, and I'm grateful for what you did." He extended his hand. "Perhaps I've been too quick to judge a man by the size of his bank account rather than the content of his character." Wade accepted the handshake, surprised by the turn in the conversation. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet," Vaughn said with a wry smile. "My daughter is still the most stubborn woman west of the Mississippi, and I suspect nearly dying has only made her more determined to live life on her own terms." Over the next 2 days, Wade found himself in the strange position of host to both the woman who had increasingly occupied his thoughts and her protective father. Dr. Harrison visited daily, pronouncing Lillian's recovery remarkable, though the swelling and pain in her leg remained significant. Wade maintained a respectful distance, focusing on ranch work during the day and taking his meals quickly to avoid prolonged interaction with his guests. But on the third evening, as he returned from the barn after tending to the horses, he found Lillian sitting alone on the front porch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders against the cooling night air. "Should you be up?" he asked, hesitating at the bottom of the steps. Lillian smiled, the moonlight illuminating her face. "Dr. Harrison said short periods of sitting would be beneficial. Besides, I was going mad staring at the same four walls." She patted the bench beside her. "Join me. Father's writing letters inside." Wade reluctantly climbed the steps and sat, maintaining a careful distance between them. "How's the pain?" "Bearable," she replied, then laughed softly at his skeptical expression. "Truly, it's improving, though I suspect I'll have quite a scar to remember this adventure by." "You're lucky to be alive," Wade said, more sharply than he intended. "I know." Lillian's voice softened. "And I haven't properly thanked you." Wade shook his head. "You don't need to, I do," she interrupted. "Not just for the snake bite. For not lecturing me about riding alone, for treating me with respect when most men would have used the situation to their advantage, for enduring my father's suspicious glares." Despite himself, Wade smiled. "He's been civil enough." "Because he's realized something I've known for some time," Lillian said, her eyes meeting his directly. "That you're a good man, Wade Calloway." The sound of his first name on her lips startled him. They had always maintained the formality of surnames, even during town socials where they occasionally exchanged pleasantries. "Lillian," he began, uncertain how to respond. "I've been thinking," she continued, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her blanket, "about how quickly life can change. One moment I was riding, enjoying the freedom of the open land, and the next—" She shuddered slightly. "It makes one reconsider what's truly important." Wade remained silent, sensing she had more to say. "Father wants me to return to Boston," she finally admitted. "He thinks after this incident I'll be more amenable to city life and a suitable marriage." An unexpected pang of loss struck Wade at the thought of Lillian leaving Kelton. "And what do you want?" "I want to stay." Her answer came quickly, definitively. "This land, this life. It's in my blood now. I can't imagine returning to corsets and calling cards and meaningless social niceties." She paused, gathering courage. "And there are other reasons I wish to remain." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Wade felt his heart rate quicken. "Lillian, I'm not the man your father wants for you," he said quietly. "My ranch is still growing. I can't offer you the comforts you're accustomed to." "I don't recall asking what you can offer me," she replied, a hint of her usual spirit returning. "I'm simply telling you that nearly dying has clarified certain feelings I've harbored for some time." Before Wade could respond, the front door opened, and Thomas Vaughn stepped onto the porch. "It's getting chilly, Lillian," he observed, his gaze moving between his daughter and Wade. "Perhaps it's time to come inside." The moment broken, Lillian nodded and allowed her father to help her to her feet. At the door, she paused and looked back at Wade. "Think about what I said, Mr. Calloway. Life's too short for unnecessary formalities, don't you think?" The following morning, Dr. Harrison declared Lillian well enough to return to Kelton, provided she continued to rest her leg for at least another week. Wade helped prepare the Vaughn's buggy, packing it with extra blankets to ensure Lillian's comfort during the journey. As Thomas Vaughn assisted his daughter into the buggy, Wade stood awkwardly nearby, unsure of the proper farewell after the intimate conversation of the previous evening. "Mr. Calloway," Thomas Vaughn extended his hand. "You have my deepest gratitude. If you ever need anything from the bank, you'll find my door open to you." "Thank you, sir," Wade replied, accepting the handshake. Then it was Lillian's turn to say goodbye. Looking up at him from her seat in the buggy, she held out her hand. "Mr. Calloway, I'm in your debt." Wade took her gloved hand, surprised when she pressed a small folded paper into his palm. "No debt between neighbors, Miss Vaughn," he replied, closing his fingers around the note. Only after the buggy had disappeared down the road did Wade unfold the paper. In neat, precise handwriting were the words, "Saturday evening, The Willow by Cottonwood Creek, 7 o'clock." For 3 days, Wade debated whether to meet Lillian as her note requested. It was madness. She was Thomas Vaughn's daughter, still recovering from a serious injury and far above his station in Kelton's social hierarchy. Yet he couldn't forget the determination in her eyes as she spoke of staying in Utah, or the way she'd said his name that night on the porch. Saturday arrived, and Wade found himself riding toward Cottonwood Creek as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. The massive willow tree came into view, its branches swaying gently in the evening breeze, and beneath it sat Lillian on a blanket spread over the grass. She wore a simple blue dress, her chestnut hair loose around her shoulders rather than pinned up in her usual practical style. "You came," she said as he dismounted, her smile brightening her entire face. "I shouldn't have," he replied honestly, tethering his horse to a nearby branch. "Your father would have every right to run me out of town for meeting you like this. My father thinks I'm having tea with Mrs. Peterson." Lillian patted the blanket beside her. "Please sit. My leg still protests too much standing." Wade reluctantly joined her, noting that she moved carefully, favoring her injured leg. "How's the recovery?" "Improving daily. Dr. Harrison says I'm healing remarkably well." She gestured to a small basket beside her. "I brought some food, nothing fancy, I'm afraid. My cooking skills are rudimentary at best." "You cooked?" Wade asked, surprised. Lillian laughed. "Don't sound so alarmed. It's only bread and cheese and some preserves. Even I can manage that much without burning down the kitchen." Despite his reservations about the meeting, Wade found himself relaxing as they shared the simple meal. Lillian was easy to talk to, asking thoughtful questions about his ranch and sharing stories of her time in Boston that had him laughing at the stuffy formality of Eastern society. As twilight deepened around them, Lillian grew more serious. "I asked you here because I wanted to speak freely, away from my father's watchful eye and the town's gossip." Wade nodded, bracing himself for whatever she might say. "When that snake struck," she began, her voice softening with the memory, "my first thought wasn't of pain or fear. It was regret. Regret for all the things I hadn't done, the feelings I hadn't expressed." She met his gaze directly. "I've watched you at town meetings and church socials for 2 years, Wade Calloway. I've seen how you stand apart, how you speak only when you have something meaningful to contribute, how you help others without seeking recognition." Wade felt his face warm at her assessment. "You've been watching me, just as you've been watching me," she replied with a knowing smile. "Don't deny it. Miguel told me how you ask after my father and me whenever you're in town." Wade made a mental note to have a word with his too talkative ranch hand. "Lillian, whatever you think you feel is not the result of gratitude for saving my life, if that's what you're about to suggest," she interrupted firmly. "My feelings existed long before that snake appeared on the trail. The incident merely gave me the courage to acknowledge them." The last rays of sunlight filtered through the willow branches, casting dappled shadows across her face. Wade found himself memorizing the moment, the scent of wildflowers in the air, the distant call of night birds, the determined set of Lillian's jaw as she laid her heart bare before him. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked finally, his voice rougher than intended. "I'm proposing nothing," she replied with a small smile. "That's traditionally the man's role, isn't it? I'm simply making my feelings clear so you can decide what, if anything, you wish to do about them." Wade ran a hand through his hair, frustrated by her calm logic in the face of such an impossible situation. Your father has plans for you, a suitable husband with prospects better than a struggling cattle ranch. My father wants my happiness, Lillian countered. He may have his own ideas about what will provide it, but ultimately he respects my choices. She reached for his hand, her fingers warm against his. The question is, what do you want, Wade? The simple touch of her hand in his broke through his remaining defenses. For 2 years he had admired her from a distance, telling himself a banker's daughter was beyond his reach, that he needed to focus on building his ranch before considering matters of the heart. But the past week had shown him how quickly life could change, how precious time truly was. I want you, he admitted finally, his voice low and certain. But I want to do this right. No secret meetings, no whispered gossip. If we're to explore these feelings, it needs to be proper. Lillian's smile was radiant in the gathering darkness. Then you'll need to speak with my father. Yes, Wade agreed, already dreading the conversation. Though perhaps I should wait until I've made a better impression than the man who had your daughter unchaperoned at his ranch. Lillian laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet creek. He's already warming to you. And I can be very persuasive when something matters to me. As night fully descended around them, Wade helped Lillian to her feet, supporting her as they walked slowly to where her horse was tethered nearby. I'll see you safely to the edge of town, he said, lifting her onto her mare despite her protests that she could manage. And then, she asked, looking down at him with those determined eyes that had first captured his attention 2 years ago. And then I'll call on you properly next Sunday after church, he replied, with your father's permission. True to his word, Wade appeared at the Vaughn residence the following Sunday afternoon, freshly shaved and wearing his best shirt. Thomas Vaughn received him in his study, listening with barely concealed surprise as Wade formally requested permission to court his daughter. You don't waste time, do you, Calloway? The older man observed, leaning back in his leather chair. I believe recent events have taught us all the value of directness, sir, Wade replied steadily. Thomas studied him for a long moment. My daughter could have her pick of suitors from prominent families, men who could provide her with a comfortable life, security, social standing. Yes, sir. Yet she speaks of you with a particular enthusiasm. Vaughn sighed heavily. Tell me honestly, can you provide for her, not just now but in the future? Lillian was raised with certain comforts. Wade met the banker's gaze directly. My ranch is growing. I've acquired additional grazing rights to the north pasture, and my breeding program is producing stronger stock each year. I can't offer luxury, but I can promise a good life, honest work, and a home where she'll be respected and cherished. The passion in his voice must have made an impression, for Thomas Vaughn's expression softened slightly. Lillian has always been headstrong, he said finally. Even as a child, once she set her mind on something, there was no dissuading her. He rose from his chair and extended his hand. You may call on my daughter, Mr. Calloway, but understand this, I expect honorable intentions and a proper courtship. Relief washed over Wade as he shook the older man's hand. You have my word, sir. The courtship that followed became the talk of Kelton over the summer months. Wade called on Lillian every Sunday after church, accompanied her and her father to town socials, and occasionally joined them for dinner at their home. Always proper, always under Thomas Vaughn's watchful eye. But there were moments, a lingering touch of hands as Wade helped Lillian into a buggy, an exchanged glance across a crowded room, a private smile shared between them that spoke of deepening feelings beyond the formal boundaries of their courtship. By early autumn, Wade's ranch had prospered enough that he felt confident in taking the next step. On a crisp September evening, he invited Lillian and her father to his ranch for dinner, where Miguel had outdone himself preparing a feast of beef, potatoes, and fresh, baked bread. After the meal, Wade suggested a short walk to show Lillian the improvements he'd made to the property. Thomas Vaughn, satisfied that they would remain in view of the house, settled on the porch with a cigar. "You've added a new corral," Lillian observed as they strolled slowly around the yard, her arm linked through Wade's. Though her leg had healed completely, she still occasionally experienced stiffness after long periods of riding. "And expanded the barn," Wade added, guiding her toward a small rise overlooking the ranch house. "From here, you can see all the way to the eastern pasture." They stopped at the crest of the hill, the setting sun painting the landscape in hues of gold and amber. Wade turned to face Lillian, taking both her hands in his. "I brought you up here for a reason," he said, his voice suddenly thick with emotion. "This is my favorite spot on the entire ranch. When I first came to Utah, I would stand here every evening and imagine what this place could become." Lillian squeezed his hands encouragingly. "And you've built something beautiful." "It's not finished," Wade replied. "There's still so much I want to do, so many dreams I have for this land." He took a deep breath. "But I've realized that none of those dreams matter without someone to share them with." Understanding dawned in Lillian's eyes as Wade reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "Lillian Vaughn," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple gold band set with a single diamond. "These past months have been the happiest of my life. That day by Cottonwood Creek, you asked what I wanted. I want a life with you building this ranch together, facing whatever challenges come our way, side by side." His voice grew husky with emotion. "Will you marry me?" Tears welled in Lillian's eyes as she nodded, too overwhelmed to speak for a moment. "Yes," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, Wade Calloway, I will marry you." Wade slipped the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her for the first time. It was a kiss full of promise, of dreams shared and futures intertwined. When they finally broke apart, Lillian laughed softly, wiping tears from her cheeks. "Father will be checking his pocket watch about now, wondering what's keeping us." "He already knows," Wade admitted. "I asked his blessing last week." Lillian's eyebrows rose in surprise, and he gave it. "Without argument, he had conditions," Wade said with a wry smile. "That I continue to expand the ranch, that we visit him regularly in town, and that his future grandchildren spend summers with him to learn about banking." "Grandchildren," Lillian repeated, color rising to her cheeks. "He's planning quite far ahead." Wade brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I told him that part was entirely up to you." Hand in hand, they walked back toward the ranch house, where Thomas Vaughn waited on the porch. Seeing their joined hands and the ring glittering on his daughter's finger, he rose to greet them. "I take it congratulations are in order," he said, his expression a mixture of resignation and genuine happiness for his daughter. "Thank you for your blessing, Father," Lillian said, embracing him tightly. Thomas Vaughn cleared his throat emotionally. "Your mother would have liked him, you know. She always said character mattered more than circumstances." He extended his hand to Wade. "Welcome to the family, son." The wedding took place in late October, with the entire town of Kelton turning out to witness the union of the banker's daughter and the rancher. The church was decorated with autumn flowers and ribbons, and even the weather cooperated, providing a gloriously sunny day despite the late season. Lillian wore a gown of cream-colored satin that her father had ordered from Salt Lake City, with lace at the collar and cuffs that had belonged to her mother. As she walked down the aisle on her father's arm, Her eyes never left Wade's face, his expression of awe and love worth every moment of the difficult journey that had brought them together. The reception that followed at the Vaughn home was the social event of the season, with food and music lasting well into the evening. But as the celebrations continued, the newly wedded couple slipped away, boarding a train for a week-long honeymoon in Salt Lake City, a wedding gift from Thomas Vaughn. As the train pulled away from the Kelton station, Lillian leaned against her husband's shoulder. "I never properly thanked that rattlesnake," she mused with a mischievous smile. "Without him, who knows how long you would have kept your distance," Wade laughed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I'd have found my courage eventually." "Perhaps," Lillian replied, her fingers intertwining with his. "But I'm rather glad things happened, as they did even the pain and the fear. It brought us here together." "Together," Wade agreed, marveling at how a moment of danger had led to the greatest happiness he'd ever known. Their return to Kelton as husband and wife marked the beginning of a partnership that would become legendary in the small town. The first year of marriage brought challenges: a harsh winter that threatened the cattle, Lillian's adjustment to ranch life after the comforts of her father's home, the constant work of building their future together. But it also brought deep joy. Wade discovered in Lillian not just a beloved wife, but a true partner in his dreams for the ranch. Her education and business sense, learned at her father's side, proved invaluable as they expanded their operation. And Lillian found in Wade the freedom and respect she had always craved, a man who valued her mind as much as her heart. By their first anniversary, the Calloway Ranch had nearly doubled in size, with new breeding stock and additional grazing land. Thomas Vaughn, seeing the success of their partnership, became an investor in their expansion, creating a bridge between his banking world and their ranching one. On a warm spring evening, 2 years after the fateful snake bite that had brought them together, Wade returned from a day of working cattle to find Lillian waiting on the porch of their home, no longer the modest cabin it had been, but a proper ranch house they had built together, with wide windows overlooking the land they both loved. "You're home early," he observed, kissing her in greeting. Lillian smiled mysteriously. "I had something important to finish before dinner." She took his hand and led him inside to the small study they shared. On the desk lay a leather-bound book, its cover embossed with the words Calloway Ranch ESD, 1878. "What's this?" Wade asked, opening the book to find pages of neatly recorded figures, maps of their property, notes on cattle bloodlines, and plans for future expansion. "Our legacy," Lillian replied, a special warmth in her voice, "for future generations of Calloways." Wade looked up sharply, understanding dawning. "Lillian, are you?" She nodded, her hands moving to rest on her stomach. "Dr. Harrison confirmed it yesterday. We'll welcome our child around Christmas." Joy unlike anything Wade had ever known washed over him. He gathered his wife in his arms, lifting her off her feet in his excitement. "A baby, our baby," Lillian laughed, her eyes shining with happy tears. "The first of many, I hope. This land deserves a family to love it for generations to come." That December, as snow blanketed the Utah desert, William Thomas Calloway entered the world, his lusty cries filling the ranch house with new life and promise. Thomas Vaughn arrived the following day, bearing gifts and fighting back tears as he held his grandson for the first time. "He has your eyes," the older man told Wade gruffly, "and hopefully his mother's good sense." Over the years that followed, the Calloway family grew, welcoming a daughter, Emma Rose, 2 years later, and another son, James, 2 years after that. The ranch prospered, becoming one of the largest and most successful operations in northern Utah. Wade and Lillian's partnership became a model for other couples in the territory, equal in their commitment to each other and to the land they cherished. On warm summer evenings, they would often sit on their porch watching their children play in the yard, and Wade would take Lillian's hand, his thumb brushing over the small scar on her wrist, a reminder of how close he had come to losing her before their life together had even begun. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked her once as they celebrated their 10th anniversary. "Choosing this life over what your father had planned for you in Boston?" Lillian's answer was a kiss that still held all the passion of their early days together. "Not for a single moment," she whispered against his lips. "Some people search their whole lives for purpose, for belonging. I found mine the day a rattlesnake brought you to my side." As the years passed and their children grew, the story of their beginning became family legend, how a dangerous reptile had inadvertently created one of the greatest love stories in Kelton's history. Their grandchildren would later beg to hear it, eyes wide at the drama of the snake bite, the heroic rescue, and the love that blossomed in its wake. And though Wade and Lillian would go on to face other challenges, droughts and harsh winters, economic downturns and personal losses, they faced them together, their bond forged in that moment of crisis, strengthening with each passing year. A testament to the unexpected ways love finds its course in even the wildest of circumstances.